The clink of a silver fork against a crystal glass was the last sound of peace Amelia Hayes would know. Surrounded by the opulent wealth of her husband's family, in a dining room dripping with chandeliers and unspoken judgment, J. Croft stood up. His voice, usually a source of comfort, cut through the air like shattering ice. And with 4 devastating words, he set her world on fire. The baby isn't mine. He expected her to crumble. He expected tears and shame. He didn't expect that by the next morning, a single piece of paper would not only prove him wrong, but expose a lie so toxic it would threaten to burn his entire family's empire to the ground. The Sunday evening light, thick and golden, slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, painting long, distorted stripes across the white marble floors. From this height, 30 stories above the relentless energy of Chicago, the city looked like a circuit board, a complex and beautiful machine that Amelia Hayes had never quite felt a part of. She ran a hand over the gentle, firm swell of her stomach, a 7-month curve that was both a promise and, increasingly, a source of profound anxiety. Her husband, J. Croft, stood by the window, his back to her. He was a statue, carved from success, dressed in a Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than her first car. His shoulders were tense, the muscles in his neck corded, as he stared down at the kingdom his family had built over 3 generations of ruthless real estate deals and shrewd investments. In the 2 years they had been married, Amelia had learned to read the weather in his posture. Tonight, a storm was brewing. "Is your mother expecting us soon?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended. Jay didn't turn. "She always is." The reply was clipped, devoid of warmth. This was the new Jay. A man who had been emerging over the last few months, slowly replacing the charming, attentive man she had fallen in love with. The old Jay would have walked over, wrapped his arms around her, and whispered reassurances about surviving another Croft family dinner. This Jay remained a distant silhouette against the dying sun. "I was thinking," Amelia ventured, forcing a brightness she didn't feel. "Maybe after the dinner, we could start seriously looking at the color swatches for the nursery. I found a lovely shade of sage green, very calming." "Amelia, please." He cut her off, finally turning. His face, usually handsome and open, was a mask of strained politeness. "Can we not talk about nurseries and paint colors right now?" The words stung a small, sharp jab to her heart. Everything about their baby, a boy they had both eagerly anticipated, now seemed to irritate him. His excitement had evaporated, replaced by a brooding suspicion she couldn't comprehend. He had stopped touching her belly, stopped talking to their son in low, rumbling tones at night. He had started coming home late, smelling of expensive whiskey and an unspoken distance that was more intoxicating and dangerous than any perfume. "Of course," she murmured, retreating. "I'm sorry, it's just this dinner. You know how she gets." She was Eleanor Croft Jay's mother, a woman of formidable elegance and even more formidable will. Eleanor had never believed Amelia, a former art curator with a middle-class background, was a suitable match for her firstborn son, the heir to the Croft consolidated empire. She saw Amelia not as a daughter-in-law, but as an acquisition that had failed to appreciate in value. Her disapproval was a constant, low-frequency hum beneath the surface of their lives, a hum that had grown louder and more distorted since the announcement of Amelia's pregnancy. "I can handle my mother," Jay said, straightening his tie with a sharp tug. "Just be agreeable tonight. Don't start any debates about politics or art. Don't give her any ammunition." "When have I ever?" Amelia asked the question, laced with a weariness that went bone deep. She had spent 2 years biting her tongue, smiling through thinly veiled insults, and dressing in the muted, expensive styles Eleanor approved of. She had contorted herself into the perfect, unthreatening ornament, all for the sake of peace, all for the love of Jay. But the peace had evaporated anyway. The drive to the Croft family estate in Lake Forest was a silent, suffocating affair. The city's gleaming towers gave way to manicured suburbs and then to sprawling, gated properties hidden behind walls of old stone and older money. The Croft estate was the grandest of them all, a stone behemoth that seemed to command the landscape its perfectly symmetrical facade, staring out at Lake Michigan with an air of cold authority. As Jay steered the Bentley up the long gravel driveway, Amelia felt the familiar tightening in her chest. This house wasn't a home. It was a museum of a family's power, and she was just a temporary exhibit. They were greeted at the door by a silent butler who took their coats. The air inside was cool and smelled of beeswax and old money. Richard Croft Jay's father was in the grand drawing room swirling a brandy. He was a paler, quieter version of his wife, a man whose opinions had long been subsumed by hers. He offered Amelia a weak, watery smile. "Amelia, you're looking well," he said, his eyes flicking to her bump and then away again, as if it were a breach of etiquette. Ethan Jay's younger brother was there too, leaning against the marble fireplace. He was the family's designated black sheep, having chosen a career as a history professor over a seat on the board. He had a sardonic glint in his eye that Amelia had always found more comforting than Jay's polished perfection. He gave her a genuine smile and a quick conspiratorial wink, and then Eleanor swept in, a vision in navy blue silk, her silver hair styled in a perfect chignon, her neck and wrists glittering with diamonds that seemed to absorb all the light in the room. "Amelia, dear," she said, her voice smooth as cream, but her eyes as sharp as glass shards. She air-kissed the space beside Amelia's cheeks. "I do hope the journey wasn't too taxing for you, in your condition." She let the word hang in the air, freighted with meaning. "We were just talking about the upcoming charity gala. Jay, I've put you and your father down for our usual table. There's a new senator from New York I want you to meet." She steered her son away, her hand on his arm, seamlessly absorbing him back into the Croft fold, leaving Amelia standing awkwardly in the center of the vast room. It was a familiar maneuver, one designed to remind Amelia of her place on the periphery. Ethan pushed himself off the fireplace and ambled over. "Don't mind her," he said in a low voice. "She's just marking her territory. She does the same thing with the new topiaries in the garden." Amelia managed a grateful smile. "Thanks, Ethan. I'm just a little tired tonight." "I don't blame you. These family dinners are an Olympic sport in passive aggression," he quipped. "You're holding the family's grand air. You'd think that would earn you a reprieve. Apparently not." His words were meant to be comforting, but they only highlighted the central, terrifying question that had been haunting Amelia for weeks. Jay was avoiding her. Eleanor was treating her with more frostiness than ever. It was all centered around the baby. Why? The summons to dinner came moments later. They sat at the long, imposing mahogany table set with a dozen pieces of silver for each place setting. The conversation, steered by Eleanor, was a predictable tour of Croft Consolidated's latest triumphs, the failures of their political opponents, and the scandalous life choices of other less disciplined wealthy families. Amelia pushed her food around her plate, the rich aromas of roasted duck and truffle risotto turning her stomach. She could feel Jay's leg next to hers, but there was no contact, no reassuring touch. There was only a chasm of silence between them, growing wider with every passing second. She caught Eleanor watching her from across the table, a strange, triumphant gleam in her eyes. It was the look of a predator that knows its prey is already trapped. A cold dread colder than the air-conditioned chill of the room washed over Amelia. Something was terribly wrong. This wasn't just another unpleasant family dinner. This was an execution, and she was the one on the block. The main course was cleared away by silent, efficient staff, and a decadent chocolate lava cake was placed before each guest. It was Jay's favorite dessert, a small, cloying detail that made the tension coiling in Amelia's gut tighten into a painful knot. The conversation had lulled, and into that vacuum, Eleanor placed her bomb, wrapped in the silk of feigned concern. "Jay, darling." She began dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. "Your father and I are concerned. We've noticed you haven't seemed yourself lately. So distant." She glanced at Amelia, a flicker of something sharp and cruel in her gaze. "We were hoping this wonderful news, the baby, would be a source of pure joy. But it seems to have brought a cloud over you." Jay placed his fork down with a deliberate, loud click that echoed in the cavernous dining room. The sound was a gunshot signaling the start of a war. He didn't look at his mother. He looked at his father, then at his brother, and finally his eyes, cold and empty, landed on Amelia. "It has," Jay said, his voice flat and hard. "It's brought a cloud of questions, of doubt." Amelia's breath hitched. Her heart began a frantic, panicked tattoo against her ribs. "Jay, what are you talking about?" she asked, her voice a fragile whisper. Ethan shifted in his seat, his brow furrowed. "Jay, this is hardly the time or place." "No, this is the perfect time, the perfect place," Jay said, his voice rising, gaining a terrible momentum. He stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the polished wood floor. He placed his hands flat on the table, leaning forward like a prosecutor addressing a hostile witness. Every eye was on him. "We're a family, aren't we? We're supposed to be honest with each other. We're supposed to protect the family name, the family legacy." Richard Croft looked pale and confused. "Son, sit down. What's gotten into you?" But Jay's focus was solely on Amelia. The man she loved had vanished, replaced by this cruel, theatrical stranger. "I've been doing some thinking, some investigating, and I've come to a conclusion that I cannot in good conscience keep to myself any longer." He paused, letting the silence stretch, wringing every last drop of drama from the moment. Amelia felt like she was underwater, the faces around her blurring the sounds of the room, muffled and distant. She could feel the blood draining from her face. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white to keep herself from swaying. "Jay, please," she begged, shaking her head, a silent plea for him to stop, to take it back, to not do what she suddenly horrifyingly knew he was about to do. He ignored her. His eyes, once her safe harbor, were now her executioners. He took a deep breath and delivered the killing blow, his voice ringing with a false, sanctimonious certainty that echoed off the high, coffered ceilings. The baby, he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent, shocked room. "The baby she is carrying is not mine." For a single eternal second, there was absolute silence. The only sound was the frantic, useless beating of Amelia's own heart. Then the world fractured. Richard gasped, his hand flying to his chest. Ethan shot to his feet, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. "What the hell are you talking about? Jay, have you lost your mind?" But Amelia couldn't hear them. All she could hear was the roar of blood in her ears and Jay's words replaying themselves over and over. Not mine. Not mine, not mine. It was an absurdity, a grotesque lie, so monumental she couldn't even begin to process it. She looked at Jay, searching his face for some sign of the man she knew, a flicker of doubt, a hint of regret. There was nothing. Only a hard, righteous conviction. And behind him, she saw Eleanor. His mother wasn't shocked. She wasn't surprised. She was watching Amelia with a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. A small, self-satisfied smile played on her lips, and in that moment, Amelia understood. This was Eleanor's masterpiece. This was her checkmate. The room erupted. Ethan was yelling at Jay, calling him a fool. Richard was trying to intercede, looking flustered and helpless. But Amelia didn't say a word. She couldn't. The lie was too big, the betrayal too absolute. It had stolen the air from her lungs, the words from her mouth. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, she pushed her chair back, the legs screeching in protest. She stood up, her body trembling violently. She didn't look at Eleanor. She didn't look at the confused face of her father-in-law or the furious one of her brother-in-law. She looked only at her husband. She saw him flinch as her eyes met his. For the first time, a sliver of uncertainty seemed to pierce his armor. Her silence, her utter devastation was more powerful than any scream would have been. Without a word, she turned and walked out of the dining room. Her legs were unsteady, but she forced them to move one foot in front of the other. She walked through the grand drawing room, past the priceless art and antique furniture. She walked through the marble foyer, her footsteps echoing in the crushing silence that had followed her out of the room. She didn't wait for the butler. She pulled the massive oak door open herself and stumbled out into the cold night air. The gravel of the driveway crunched under her heels as she walked, her mind a blank slate of shock and pain. The world had tilted on its axis. The man she had built her life with, the father of her child, had just publicly disowned them both in the cruelest way imaginable. He hadn't just broken her heart. He had detonated it, leaving nothing but smoke and ashes. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay. As she reached the end of the long driveway, the tears finally came hot and silent, tracking paths of cold on her numb cheeks. She was alone, pregnant, and publicly shamed. And somewhere behind her, in that cold stone fortress, her husband was being congratulated by his mother for destroying her. The headlights of the Uber cut through the darkness, illuminating a path away from the manicured prison of Lake Forest and back toward the anonymous grit of the city. Amelia sat huddled in the back seat, the buttery leather feeling cold and alien against her skin. She had directed the driver to her sister's apartment in Lincoln Park, the only sanctuary she could think of. The driver, a kind-faced man named George, kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, his expression a mixture of pity and concern. He had seen her emerge, sobbing, from the gates of the grand estate, a lone figure in a cocktail dress, and had discreetly offered a bottle of water and a box of tissues. Each sob that racked Amelia's body felt like a physical blow to her unborn son. She wrapped her arms around her stomach, a primal protective gesture. He's safe, she told herself, the thought a tiny, flickering candle in a hurricane of pain. I will keep him safe. Jay's words were shards of glass embedded in her mind. The baby isn't mine. The sheer calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't a private accusation whispered in the heat of an argument. It was a public declaration, a performance for his family, for his mother. The image of Eleanor's triumphant smirk was burned onto the back of her eyelids. This was her doing. Amelia was sure of it. For months, Eleanor had been planting the seeds, a casual remark here, a pointed question there. Are you sure of your dates, dear? Sometimes first-time mothers get confused. Jay seems so stressed. I hope you're not putting too much pressure on him. Amelia had dismissed it as the usual petty needling. She had been a fool. She had underestimated the depths of Eleanor's malice. Her sister Sophie lived in a third-floor walk-up that was the antithesis of the Croft estate. The apartment was filled with overflowing bookshelves, mismatched furniture, and the comforting clutter of a life lived with passion rather than for presentation. When Sophie opened the door and saw Amelia's tear-streaked face and ruined mascara, she didn't waste a second on questions. She simply pulled her sister into a fierce hug. "Oh, Ames," she whispered, her voice thick with immediate, unconditional support. "Come in. Come inside." Sophie, a sharp-witted journalist who had no patience for the pomp and circumstance of the Croft family, sat Amelia down on her worn velvet couch, wrapped her in a quilt, and pressed a mug of steaming chamomile tea into her trembling hands. "Tell me everything," Sophie said, her eyes flashing with a protective fire. "What did that bastard do?" Through fresh waves of tears, Amelia recounted the entire horrifying scene, the tense atmosphere, Eleanor's goading, and Jay's cold theatrical announcement. As she spoke the words aloud, they became real, their monstrosity solidifying in the cozy, safe space of her sister's living room. He said it. In front of all of them, Amelia choked out. His father, Ethan. He looked me in the eye and said our baby wasn't his. Sophie's face was pale with rage. That son of a bitch, that spineless, mummy-controlled walking trust fund of a man. How dare he? And let me guess, the Wicked Witch of Lake Forest was sitting there enjoying the show. Amelia nodded numbly. She looked pleased, like she'd won. Because she thinks she has. Sophie said, her voice hard. This has her fingerprints all over it. She's been trying to get rid of you since day one. She couldn't break you, so now she's trying to discredit you in the most disgusting way possible. And Jay, God, Jay, I never trusted him. He's weak, Ames. He let her poison him against you. Sophie was right. Jay, the powerful CEO, the man who commanded boardrooms, was utterly pathetically weak when it came to his mother. He had chosen Eleanor's approval over his wife and unborn child. The betrayal was so profound it was almost impossible to fathom. Flashbacks from their happier times ambushed her. Jay on one knee on a bridge in Prague, his face alight with love. Jay holding her hand during the first ultrasound, his eyes wide with wonder at the tiny, flickering heartbeat on the screen. A little Croft, he had whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Our son. Where was that man now? How could he have been so completely erased? What do I do, Soph? Amelia whispered, the mug rattling in her hands. He's shamed me. He's denied our son. My whole life. It's just gone. Sophie took the mug from her and placed it on the coffee table. She took Amelia's hands in hers, her grip firm and grounding. No. You listen to me. Your life is not gone. He did not take anything from you that you can't get back. He tried to shame you, but you have nothing to be ashamed of. He's the one who should be ashamed, and we are going to make him regret this for the rest of his miserable life. A spark of fight ignited within Amelia, fanned by her sister's righteous anger. Sophie was right. Crumbling was what Eleanor and Jay expected. It was what they wanted. "He has to know he's wrong," Amelia said, her voice gaining a sliver of its strength back. "I can't let this lie stand. Not for me. For my son. My son needs to know his father is a liar. But he is not illegitimate." "Exactly," Sophie said, her eyes gleaming with purpose. "So we don't wait for him to come to his senses. We don't beg. We act. We fight back with the one thing they can't manipulate or buy their way out of the truth." An idea born of desperation and a burgeoning fury began to form in Amelia's mind. A public accusation demanded a public refutation. Words against words wouldn't be enough. She needed irrefutable scientific proof, and she needed it now. "I need a DNA test." Amelia said the words tasting of power. "A paternity test. Not in a week, not in a few days. I need it tomorrow." Sophie's eyes widened, then a slow, predatory smile spread across her face. "Ames. That's brilliant. That is a power move." She grabbed her laptop from a stack of papers. "Okay, let's look. There have to be private labs that do rush processing. The kind of place celebrities and politicians use to solve their indiscretions. It'll cost a fortune." "I don't care," Amelia said, pulling out her phone to check her personal bank account. It wasn't Croft money. It was the money she had saved from her years at the gallery and a small inheritance from her grandmother. It was her independence. "I'll pay whatever it costs." For the next hour, they scoured the internet. They found a high-end private laboratory, a discreet service called Veritas Genetics, that specialized in court-admissible results with an expedited 24-hour turnaround for a staggering fee. They could send a certified phlebotomist to her location for the sample collection first thing in the morning. The only problem was getting a sample from Jay. "He'll never agree to it," Amelia said, the first flicker of despair returning. "He's convinced himself of this lie. He won't cooperate." Sophie tapped her chin, thinking. "We don't need his cooperation. We just need his DNA. A toothbrush, a hairbrush, a used glass." Amelia's mind raced. Jay was a creature of habit. Every morning he used the same electric toothbrush which he kept in the ensuite bathroom of their penthouse. He had likely gone back there tonight to their bed, as if nothing had happened. The thought of returning to that apartment, to their shared space, made her feel sick. But the alternative, letting the lie fester, was infinitely worse. His toothbrush. Amelia said, her voice firm with resolve. "He'll be at the office by 7:30. I can get in and out before he even knows I was there." "It's risky," Sophie said, though her expression was one of admiration. "It's necessary," Amelia replied. "This isn't just about my reputation anymore, Soph. This is about my son. When he grows up and asks about this, I need to be able to show him that his mother fought for him, that I did not let a lie define his beginning." The plan was set. Sophie made the call to Veritas Genetics, scheduling a phlebotomist to come to her apartment at 9 a.m. As the first pale grey light of dawn began to touch the Chicago skyline, Amelia didn't feel tired. The shock and grief had been transmuted into something else, something hard and sharp and resolute. She was no longer just Jay Croft's wronged wife. She was a mother on a mission, and this was a war she was going to win. The sterile, oppressive silence of the penthouse was the first thing that hit Jay. He had returned from Lake Forest after 1 a.m. half-drunk on his father's expensive scotch and his mother's toxic praise. He had expected to find Amelia there crying. He had rehearsed the cold, dismissive things he would say to her, the lines his mother had helped him craft. But the apartment was empty. Her side of the bed was cold and untouched. Her overnight bag was gone, A part of him, a small, frightened part he refused to acknowledge, felt a pang of something. Loss. Fear. He pushed it down, replacing it with the righteous anger Eleanor had so carefully cultivated. She had run. A guilty conscience, his mother had called it. Proof. Now at 6 a.m., nursing a throbbing headache and a stomach sour with regret. The silence was less a victory and more an accusation. The apartment usually filled with the scent of the flowers Amelia always kept, and the soft sound of her moving about felt like a mausoleum. He walked into the kitchen and saw the color swatches for the nursery, still sitting on the granite island, a splash of cheerful sage green in the cold monochrome space. He swept them into the trash with a sharp, angry motion. He showered and dressed for work on autopilot, the motions mechanical. As he was about to leave, his phone buzzed. It was his mother. "Jay, darling. I just wanted to check in." Eleanor's smooth voice purred through the phone. "I imagine you're feeling relieved to have finally gotten it out in the open." "I feel hungover," he grumbled, rubbing his temples. "That's to be expected. It was a difficult but necessary thing to do. You upheld the honor of this family. Your father is very proud, even if he's too timid to say it." A beat of silence. "Have you heard from her?" "No. She's gone." "Took a bag." Jay said the words tasting like ash. "Good," Eleanor said with satisfaction. "That's for the best. It's a tacit admission of guilt. Now the next step is to have our legal team, led by Mr. Davenport, draw up the divorce papers. We need to move quickly, Jay. We'll cite infidelity. We can be generous, of course. A small, quiet settlement to make her go away and relinquish any and all claims. Especially, she added, her voice turning to steel, any claims on behalf of the child. The word child jolted him. He thought of the ultrasound picture tucked away in his wallet, a picture he used to look at 12 times a day. He felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the scotch. "Right," he said, his voice hollow. "Davenport. I'll have him call you this afternoon. Chin up, my boy. You've just dodged a bullet. A very common gold-digging bullet. Now go to work, show them who's in charge. Remember who you are. You are a Croft." He hung up the silence of the apartment, rushing back in to fill the void. He felt sick. He remembered Amelia's face when he'd made his pronouncement. The utter shock, the devastation. There hadn't been an ounce of guilt in her eyes, only a deep, soul-shattering hurt. Could he have been wrong? He shook his head, chasing the thought away. The proof was undeniable. His mother had been so thorough. 3 months ago, she had first planted the seed. She had hired a private investigator, she'd said, concerned about Amelia's frequent lunches with a man from her old art world, a gallery owner named Sebastian. Then came the proof, grainy photographs of Amelia and Sebastian having coffee laughing, a single shot of him touching her arm. It was circumstantial, but Eleanor had woven it into a damning narrative. The final nail in the coffin had been the report from the investigator delivered to Jay a week ago. It included hotel records, a room booked in Sebastian's name at a boutique hotel on a day Amelia had claimed to be at a day-long art symposium. "She's a clever, manipulative little thing," Eleanor had said, her voice dripping with pity for her son. She thought she could pass another man's child off as a Croft to secure her future. "I'm so sorry, Jay. I'm so sorry you have to be the one to bear this." He had been blinded by rage, by a sense of betrayal so profound, it felt like a physical violation. His mother had guided that rage, aimed it, and helped him pull the trigger. As he was about to walk out the door, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was Ethan. Jay ignored it. He wasn't in the mood for a lecture from his sanctimonious younger brother. Ethan called again. And again. On the fourth call, Jay answered with a snarl. "What, Ethan?" "You're a coward and a fool." Ethan's voice snapped with no preamble. "I hope you're proud of yourself. You didn't just hurt Amelia. You destroyed her." "For what?" "To get a pat on the head from Mom." "You don't know what you're talking about," Jay shot back. "I have proof." "Proof? What proof?" "A folder of garbage from one of Mom's pet detectives." "Did you even talk to Amelia? Did you ask her a single question before you crucified her in front of everyone?" "I didn't have to. The evidence was clear. No evidence is clear when you only look at one side of it." Ethan's voice was raw with anger. "I called Sebastian this morning." Jay froze his hand on the doorknob. "You did what I know him, you idiot. My university buys art from his gallery. He's gay. He's been with his partner for 10 years. The symposium you were so suspicious of. It was a fundraiser for LGBTQ youth in the arts. I know because I donated to it. He and Amelia are friends, colleagues. He was helping her plan a surprise for you. A commission of a painting for the baby's nursery. From a new artist she's crazy about. That's why it was a secret." The floor seemed to drop out from under Jay. Every word from Ethan was a hammer blow, shattering the carefully constructed reality his mother had built around him. And the hotel, Jay asked, his voice barely a whisper. The fundraiser was held there. In the ballroom, Ethan said, his voice softening slightly with pity. "Jay, Mom played you. She's been trying to get rid of Amelia since the wedding. She saw an opening, and she drove a truck through it, and you handed her the keys." Jay sank onto a bench in the foyer, the phone slipping from his numb fingers. It couldn't be true. His mother wouldn't. She wouldn't lie to him like that. It was too monstrous, too diabolical. But as he sat there in the echoing silence of the life he had just annihilated, the pieces began to click into place. Eleanor's smug satisfaction. Her haste to get lawyers involved. Her complete lack of empathy. And Amelia's face, her beautiful, honest face, shattered with a pain so profound it could only have been born of innocence. He had made a mistake. A catastrophic, soul-destroying mistake. He hadn't just been wrong. He had been a monster. He had allowed his own insecurities and his mother's venom to curdle his love into poison. Panic, cold and sharp, seized him. He had to find her. He had to fix this. He scrambled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely type her name. He called her. It went straight to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. He sent a frantic text. "Amelia, please. We need to talk. I think I've made a terrible mistake." No response. The message sat there, a single blue tick of delivery, a testament to his failure. He had built walls of wealth and power around himself his entire life, but at that moment, Jay Croft had never felt so utterly, terrifyingly powerless. He didn't know where his pregnant wife was, and he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he might have just lost her and his son forever. The email arrived at 10:17 a.m. It landed in Amelia's inbox with a soft, unassuming chime that felt cataclysmic. The subject line was Stark Veritas Genetics, Case VG743B, Expedited Paternity Results. Amelia and Sophie were huddled together on the couch, a fortress of pillows and quilts built against a world that had turned hostile. Amelia hadn't slept. She had spent the morning pacing, replaying the horror of the dinner, her resolve hardening with every step. The phlebotomist, a discreet and professional woman, had come and gone, leaving behind a small cotton ball taped to the crook of Amelia's arm, and a gaping hole of anxiety in the room. The courier dispatched to the penthouse had been successful retrieving the head of Jay's toothbrush from the master bathroom, an act of espionage that felt both thrilling and deeply sad. Now the truth was here locked inside a password-protected PDF. "This is it," Sophie said, her voice tight. "Are you ready?" Amelia took a deep, shuddering breath. Was she ready? She knew what the results would say, but seeing it in black and white felt like a final, irrevocable step. There would be no going back after this. The flimsy, fractured hope that this was all a terrible misunderstanding that Jay would apologize for would be obliterated. This was war now, and this document was her declaration. "Open it," Amelia said, her voice steady. Sophie typed in the password. The file opened. It was a formal laboratory report filled with technical jargon, allele frequencies, and genetic markers. But at the bottom of the first page, in a bold, unequivocal summary, was the conclusion. Analysis of the DNA profiles for the alleged father, J. Croft, and the fetus demonstrates a genetic match. The probability of paternity is 99.9998%. Probability of paternity is 99.998%. The words seemed to lift off the screen. Amelia read them once, then twice. A single hot tear escaped and slid down her cheek. But it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of rage, of vindication, of sheer, unadulterated fury. The scientific, undeniable truth. Sophie let out a long, slow whistle. Well, there it is. The nail in his coffin. She looked at Amelia, her eyes searching her sister's face. "So, what's the plan? Do you send this to him? To his lawyer? Do you post it on every billboard in the city?" Amelia closed the laptop. The storm inside her had passed, leaving behind a calm, cold certainty. Sending an email felt too easy, too impersonal. This was not a business transaction. This was a reckoning. Jay had humiliated her in front of his family. She would deliver the truth to him in the very same arena. "I'm going back there," she said. "Back to the estate?" Sophie asked, her voice laced with alarm. "Ames, are you sure? To face that nest of vipers alone?" "I won't be alone," Amelia said, placing a hand on her stomach. "And I'm not the person who left that house last night." She stood up and went to the closet where Sophie kept a few of her things. She pulled out a simple, elegant crimson dress. It was a color Eleanor despised, a color of boldness and life. It was a declaration in itself. "I'm not going there to beg for him back," she said, her voice ringing with a newfound power she barely recognized. "I'm not going there for an apology. I'm going there for myself, for my son. I'm going to make them look at the truth. I'm going to make them choke on it." Meanwhile, at the Croft estate, a different kind of storm was breaking. Jay had driven there in a blind panic after his conversation with Ethan. He had stormed into his father's study, his face ashen, his hands shaking. "Where is she?" he demanded of his mother, who was arranging roses in a vase, the picture of serene control. Eleanor didn't look up. "Jay, your voice. There's no need to be hysterical. She's likely hiding out with that sister of hers, planning her next move." It's what her kind does." "Her kind," Jay echoed, his voice cracking. "Her kind. You lied to me. You lied about everything." Eleanor finally turned her eyes, narrowing. "I did what was necessary to protect you, to protect this family. You hired a PI who faked a report. You manipulated me. Sebastian is gay." "Mom." "The hotel was for a charity fundraiser." He yelled, the words tumbling out in a frantic, desperate torrent. Eleanor's composure finally fractured. A flicker of panic crossed her face before being replaced by hardened denial. "The man is lying to protect her. It's a conspiracy. Can't you see? She's turned them all against you." "No." Jay roared, slamming his hand on his father's antique desk, scattering a stack of papers. "The only person who has turned anyone against me is you. You've hated her from the beginning because she wasn't from some ancient inbred family with a summer home in the Hamptons. You couldn't control her, so you decided to destroy her." Richard Croft, who had been watching the exchange with a bewildered expression, finally spoke up. "Eleanor, is this true? Did you fabricate this evidence?" "I was protecting our legacy." She shrieked, her mask of civility completely gone. "That girl is a conniving nobody. Who knows what diseases she carries, what low-class bloodline she would be bringing into this family. I did it for us. For Jay." It was at that exact moment that the butler appeared at the door, his face impassive, but his eyes wide. "Ma'am, sir. Mrs. Amelia Croft is here. She is asking to see you." Jay's blood ran cold. Amelia. She was here. Before Eleanor could refuse, Jay pushed past her. "Let her in. Let her in now." Amelia walked into the drawing room. She wasn't the broken, weeping woman who had fled the night before. She stood tall and straight in her crimson dress, her chin held high, her eyes clear and focused. She held a single folded piece of paper in her hand. She looked magnificent. She looked terrifying. She ignored Eleanor and Richard. She ignored Ethan, who had just arrived, and was standing by the doorway, his face a mixture of concern and hope. Her gaze was fixed entirely on her husband. "Jay," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion, but a cold, hard clarity. "Last night you made an accusation. You did it publicly in front of your family. You called me a whore, and you called our son a bastard. You tried to shame me." She took a step forward, her eyes never leaving his. "You wanted proof. You put your faith in lies and whispers and grainy photographs. You put your faith in her," she said with a flick of her eyes toward Eleanor. A dismissal so complete it was more insulting than any invective. "You should have put your faith in me." She stopped directly in front of him, so close she could see the frantic pulse beating in his throat. "But since my word wasn't good enough for you, I got you something else." She held out the folded paper. Her hand was perfectly steady. "Here is your proof. From a state-of-the-art genetics lab. It's the truth, Jay. The scientific 99.998% certain truth." Jay's hand trembled as he took the paper from her. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the page, his face growing paler with every word he read. He swayed slightly, as if the ground beneath him had given way. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with a horror so profound it was almost inhuman. He saw not just the ruin of their marriage, but the ruin of himself. He saw the monster he had become. "Amelia, He stammered, his voice breaking. "Oh, God. What have I done?" Amelia didn't offer a shred of comfort. She simply stood her ground, a statue of righteous fury. You believed a lie because it was easier than believing in me, she said, her voice cutting him to the quick. And that is something this piece of paper can't fix. She turned her gaze to Eleanor, who looked as if she had been slapped. Congratulations, Eleanor. You won. You got exactly what you wanted. You destroyed your son. Without another word, Amelia turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind the wreckage of the Croft family, the damning piece of paper lying on the floor where Jay had dropped it, and a silence more damning than any accusation. The silence that followed Amelia's departure was a living entity. It was thick with the poison of Eleanor's lies, the stench of Jay's weakness, and the sharp, clean finality of Amelia's judgment. The single sheet of paper from Veritas Genetics lay on the Persian rug like a fallen white flag, signifying the end of a war that had left no victors, only casualties. Jay stood frozen, his world completely upended. The truth he had just read didn't just exonerate Amelia. It convicted him. It convicted his mother. He looked at Eleanor, her face a ghastly collage of fury and fear, and he didn't see his protector. He saw a saboteur, a woman so consumed by her own prejudice and need for control that she had willingly sacrificed her own son's happiness to win a petty imaginary war. It was Richard, the quiet, passive patriarch, who finally broke the spell. He walked over and picked up the DNA report, his hand shaking slightly as he read it. He then looked at his wife, his pale blue eyes, usually so full of deference, now blazing with a cold, unfamiliar fire. All these years, Eleanor, he said, his voice quiet, but carrying the weight of decades of silent submission. All these years I have allowed you to run this family, to run my life. I stood by while you drove a wedge between our sons. I stood by while you treated that lovely, intelligent young woman with nothing but contempt. But this is monstrous. To do this to our own grandchild. To our son. He shook his head, a look of profound disgust on his face. I'm done. We're done. He turned and walked out of the room without a backward glance, the finality of his exit more damning than any shout. Eleanor was left standing alone, her empire of manipulation crumbling around her. Jay finally moved. He didn't spare his mother a glance. He bolted out of the house, his heart pounding with a singular, desperate purpose. Find Amelia. He saw her at the end of the long driveway, getting into Sophie's car. Amelia, wait! He cried, running his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel. The car door closed, but it didn't drive away. Amelia got out, her face unreadable. She stood by the car, waiting a silent, imposing judge. He stopped a few feet from her, breathless and broken. Amelia, I am so sorry. I know that word is meaningless right now. I was a fool. I was weak. I let her poison me. I don't know what to say. There is no excuse. There is no justification for what I did to you, to our son. Tears streamed down his face, genuine tears of shame and self-loathing. Please, tell me what I have to do to fix this. I'll do anything. I'll leave my family. I'll give up the company. I'll spend the rest of my life earning back your trust. Amelia listened, her expression unchanging. The Jay begging before her was the man she had loved, but the image of the cold, cruel stranger from the night before was seared into her memory. There is no fixing this, Jay, she said, her voice calm and even. You can't unsay what you said. You can't undo the humiliation. You can't erase the fact that when you had to choose between my love and your mother's lies, you chose her. You didn't just doubt me. You sentenced me without a trial. She took a step closer, her eyes boring into his. The man I married would have defended me. He would have trusted me. That man is gone. Maybe he never existed at all. Maybe he was just an illusion I wanted to believe in. No, he's here, Jay pleaded, reaching for her, but she stepped back out of his reach. I love you, Amelia. I love our son. Do you? She asked, a flicker of her own pain finally showing through. You have a funny way of showing it. Love is not a weapon, Jay. And trust isn't something you can buy back with apologies or grand gestures. It's built in quiet moments, and you and your mother have bulldozed every single one of those moments into the ground. She opened the car door again. I'm not going to file for divorce tomorrow. I'm not going to fight you for money. That's what your mother would expect. Instead, I'm going to do what's best for my son. I'm going to go home to my sister's apartment, and I'm going to focus on having a healthy, peaceful pregnancy, something you have made impossible in our home. She paused, delivering her final terms. You will provide for your son. You will have a chance to be his father. But whether you will ever get a chance to be my husband again, that is a decision I haven't made. And it's not one you get to influence. You don't get to fix this, Jay. You have to live with what you broke. And I have to decide if I can ever live with you again. With that, she got into the car. Sophie gave Jay a look of pure contempt before pulling away, leaving him standing alone in the long, empty driveway of a house that no longer felt like a home. As the car turned onto the main road, Amelia didn't look back. She felt a profound, aching sadness. But for the first time in a long time, she also felt free. She had walked into the lion's den and emerged not only unscathed but stronger. She had lost a gilded cage and found her own power. The future was uncertain, and the path to forgiveness was long and perhaps impossible. But it would be her path on her terms. She placed a hand on her belly, on the tiny, innocent life that had been at the center of the storm, and she made a silent promise. His life would not begin with a lie. It would begin with his mother's truth. Amelia's story is a chilling reminder that the deepest betrayals often come from those we vow to love, and that truth is a weapon no amount of money can ever silence. In the face of unthinkable public humiliation, she didn't just find her voice. She found a strength forged in fire, proving that personal integrity is the one asset you can never put a price on. She turned her deepest pain into her greatest power, emerging not as a victim, but as a warrior for herself and her son. What would you have done in her place? Could forgiveness ever follow a lie that, deep or is trust once shattered, gone forever? We want to hear your take in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story of justice and empowerment, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who appreciates a powerful comeback, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another unbelievable real-life drama. What happens when the fairy tale shatters? For Olivia Croft, it happened with the sound of knuckles pulverizing drywall inches from her face. Her husband, Harrison Croft, the tech billionaire, lauded on magazine covers as a visionary, showed her his true face in their $50 million Park Avenue penthouse. He was a monster hiding in plain sight. Pregnant and terrified, Olivia knew that running wasn't enough. He would find her. He would control the narrative. So in the terrifying hours that followed, she made a choice. She wouldn't just be a victim. She would be the architect of his downfall, using the one weapon he never accounted for the truth captured in crystal-clear 4K video. The argument, like most of them, started over something laughably insignificant: a caterer for the upcoming Croft Foundation gala. Harrison wanted per se. Olivia, having heard whispers of their declining standards, suggested a private consultation with Daniel Hum's team from 11 Madison Park. To the outside world, it was the epitome of a 1% problem. To Olivia, sitting in their sprawling penthouse that overlooked Central Park like a kingdom, it was a test. A small, seemingly harmless push to see if she still had a voice. Harrison Croft didn't just occupy a room, he consumed it. At 42, he still possessed the restless, predatory energy that had helped him build his tech empire, Croft Enterprises, from a garage startup into a global behemoth. His public persona, curated with meticulous precision by a team of PR sharks, was that of a maverick genius, charming, slightly eccentric, and devoted to his beautiful younger wife. They were the golden couple, their life a meticulously art-directed fantasy for the masses. Daniel Hum Harrison scoffed, not looking up from his tablet, where stock tickers glowed a venomous green. "We're not running a vegan bake sale, Olivia. We need prestige. Per se is prestige. Harrison, I've heard." "You've heard." He mimicked his voice, dripping with condescension. He finally looked at her, his blue eyes, so often described in the press as piercingly intelligent, turning flat and cold. It was a look she had come to dread. "You hear things from your little coterie of socialites and lunch havers. I build things. I make decisions based on data, on brand power. Not gossip." Olivia felt the familiar heat rise in her cheeks. At 7 months pregnant, her body already felt like a foreign country, and his dismissiveness made her feel like an unwelcome tourist in her own home. She placed a hand on her swollen belly, a subconscious gesture of protection. "It's not gossip. It's a gala for our foundation. My name is on it, too." "I just want it to be perfect," she said, her voice softer than she intended. She hated how he made her small. "It will be perfect when you stop trying to meddle in things you don't understand." He stood up, the tablet clattering onto the glass coffee table. He began to pace a coast tiger in a bespoke Brioni suit. The penthouse, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture, suddenly felt claustrophobic. "Do you have any idea the pressure I'm under? The Vanguard deal is on a knife's edge. We have a hostile takeover bid from Kenji Tanaka's firm in Tokyo. My entire legacy is on the line, and you're here debating canapés. This has nothing to do with canapés, and you know it," she retorted, a spark of her old self flaring up. Before she was Mrs. Croft, she was Olivia Davenport, a sharp art curator with a master's degree from Sotheby's. She had a mind, an opinion, a life. He had systematically dismantled it, piece by piece, cloaking the demolition in the guise of luxury and protection. "Oh, enlighten me then. What is this about?" he sneered, turning to face her fully. This was the precipice, the point where she could retreat, murmur an apology, and let him win. It was the easier path, the one she had taken 100 times before. But the life growing inside her made her brave. She couldn't let her child see her as a doormat. "It's about respect, Harrison," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "It's about you treating me like a partner, not a decorative accessory you acquired along with this apartment." The words hung in the air, thick and dangerous. Harrison's face, usually so controlled for the cameras, contorted. A vein pulsed in his temple. He had a slight twitch in his jaw that signaled the point of no return. It was twitching now. An accessory, he whispered, the sound more menacing than a shout. He took a step toward her, then another. She instinctively shrank back into the plush cushions of the Roche-Beaubois sofa. I gave you everything. Everything. A life you couldn't even dream of. I plucked you from obscurity and put you on a throne. I had a life before you. I was happy. You were a nobody, he roared, the sound echoing off the cold glass and marble. He was standing over her now, his shadow engulfing her. His face was inches from hers, his breath hot with rage. She could smell the expensive scotch on it. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her defiance. This was it. The rage she had only seen in flashes in slammed doors and thrown phones was now directed squarely at her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. She saw his eyes dart to the side, to the pristine white wall next to her head. What happened next was a blur of motion and sound. His arm, a piston of raw power, shot out. She flinched, a scream catching in her throat, convinced the blow was for her. The impact was like a gunshot. His fist, adorned with a simple but obscenely expensive platinum wedding band, smashed into the drywall. The plaster exploded inward, leaving a crater, a spiderweb of cracks, spreading out from the point of impact. Dust and debris rained down, some of it catching in her hair. Silence. A profound, deafening silence filled the room, broken only by Harrison's ragged breathing. He stared at his own fist, then at the hole, then at her. His eyes were wide, not with remorse, but with the wild, terrifying thrill of his own unleashed power. Olivia didn't move. She couldn't. Her entire world had just narrowed to the jagged hole in the wall, a violent, gaping wound in their perfect home, just a hand's breadth from her temple, from her baby. Slowly, Harrison pulled his hand back. His knuckles were raw and bleeding. He looked at her, and for a fleeting second she saw a flicker of something panic, maybe even fear of what he'd done. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a chilling calm. Now he said, his voice a low, steady threat. The caterer is per se. We are not discussing this again. Clean yourself up. You look a mess. He turned and walked away, heading toward his office without a backward glance, leaving her alone with the ringing in her ears, the dust on her skin, and the terrifying, undeniable truth of the man she had married. For a long time she just sat there trembling. The fear was a physical thing, a cold liquid seeping into her bones. But as the minutes ticked by, something else began to crystallize beneath the terror. It was a cold, hard resolve. He thought the argument was over. He thought he had won. He was wrong. The argument wasn't over. The war had just begun. Her eyes flickered from the hole in the wall to a decorative ficus tree in the corner of the room. Tucked discreetly among its leaves, a tiny black lens was aimed directly at the sofa. The nanny cam she'd installed 2 months ago, after he'd accidentally broken her laptop during another argument. She had told herself it was for the baby's safety. But in her heart, she knew. She'd been waiting for this. The proof. The hours after the explosion of violence were a study in surreal normalcy. Harrison didn't emerge from his office. A quiet, almost ghostly maid appeared on schedule, her eyes deliberately avoiding the crater in the wall as she polished the already gleaming surfaces of the penthouse. Dinner was served for one a filet mignon. Olivia couldn't touch its bloody center, a sickening reminder of Harrison's knuckles. Olivia moved as if in a trance. She bathed the warm water, doing little to stop the tremors that racked her body. She slipped into a silk nightgown, the fabric feeling like a costume for a role she no longer wanted to play. Every sound, the hum of the city below, the whisper of the air conditioning, was magnified a potential threat. Her mind, however, was no longer frozen in fear. It was racing, working with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She knew Harrison. She knew his patterns. Tomorrow, a team of contractors would appear silent and efficient, and the wall would be repaired, plastered, and repainted. By evening, it would be as if nothing had happened. He would likely buy her a gift, something extravagant like a Cartier bracelet or a rare first-edition book. A silent transactional apology that was more about erasing his guilt than expressing remorse. He would consider the matter closed. He would expect her to fall back in line. Not this time. Once the penthouse was cloaked in the deep silence of 2 a.m., Olivia slipped out of bed. She moved with a thief's stealth through the cavernous apartment she now saw as a prison. The moonlight streaming through the windows cast long, eerie shadows. She bypassed the living room, the hole in the wall a dark, accusing eye. Her destination was the small, unused nursery. She had fought him for this room. He had wanted it to be a secondary home gym. She had insisted on a space for their child, and in a rare moment of acquiescence he'd agreed. It was here, amongst the unassembled crib and boxes of organic baby clothes, that she had set up her secret command center. The nanny cam wasn't just a camera. It was a state-of-the-art security device sold under the guise of baby monitoring that streamed and saved encrypted footage to a secure offshore cloud server. Olivia had spent weeks researching it, paying for it with cash from a secret bank account she'd been siphoning small amounts into for the past year. She sat down at the small desk she'd placed in the corner, her fingers trembling as she typed in the long, complex password to access the server. The portal opened. There it was, a timeline of video files time-stamped and dated. She navigated to today's date, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She found the file labeled Living Room Cam 1745 to 1830. She clicked play. The scene unfolded in chilling high definition. The colors were vivid, the audio painfully clear. She watched the argument as if it were a movie starring a stranger. She saw herself looking small and vulnerable on the sofa. She saw Harrison, his swagger, his condescension, his escalating rage. She heard his voice a venomous hiss, then a roar. And then she saw it. The lunge, the blur of his arm, the explosion of plaster. She saw herself flinch, her body curling in on itself to protect her unborn child. She saw him stand there breathing heavily, a conqueror surveying his territory. She heard his final chilling words. "Clean yourself up." Watching it back was 1,000 times worse than living it. There was no ambiguity, no room for him to twist the narrative. It wasn't a he said, she said. It was a cold, hard, visual fact. He hadn't just punched a wall. He had performed an act of terror, a clear and calculated threat designed to obliterate her spirit, and he had done it to his pregnant wife. She downloaded the file, saving 3 separate copies to encrypted USB drives. One for her, one for a safe deposit box, and one for what she was about to do. Her first call was to her sister. Sophie Davenport was a pragmatic ER doctor living in Boston, and the one person who had never been swayed by Harrison's charm or wealth. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Liv, it's 2 a.m. Is the baby okay?" Tears. Olivia had been holding back, finally broke free. In choked sobs, She recounted the entire evening, the words tumbling out in a torrent of fear and fury. Sophie listened without interruption, a grim silence on the other end of the line. "I'm booking the first flight to LaGuardia," Sophie said, the moment she finished, her voice all business. "Pack a bag, just the essentials, passports, documents, any cash you have. You're coming to Boston with me." "No," Olivia said the single word, sharp and clear. The sobbing stopped. "If I just run, he'll paint me as an unstable, hysterical, pregnant woman. He'll freeze my assets. He'll hire private investigators. He will use our child as a pawn. He will destroy me, Soph. I can't just run. I have to burn his kingdom to the ground." There was a pause. "What are you talking about?" Sophie asked, a note of alarm in her voice. "I have a video, Sophie, of the whole thing." The silence on the other end was now one of shock, quickly followed by a dawning understanding. "Oh, Liv. You brilliant, crazy woman. I'm going to leak it," Olivia said, the decision solidifying into something unbreakable. "But I can't just dump it on the internet. That's amateur. It needs to be handled by someone credible, someone he can't buy or intimidate." Her mind was already working, connecting dots from her past life. Before Harrison, her work as a curator had put her in touch with journalists covering the art world, including the high-stakes world of auctions and forgeries. One name stood out: Ben Carter. He wasn't a gossip columnist. He was a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter for the New York Chronicle, known for his meticulous, fact-checked takedowns of powerful, corrupt men. He had once interviewed her for a piece on art repatriation. He had been tough fare and unimpressed by wealth. He was perfect. "I need you to do something for me," Olivia said to her sister. "I'm going to wire you the last of my emergency fund. I need you to find me the most ruthless, terrifying divorce attorney in New York City. A shark. I want her ready to file the second the story breaks." "Consider it done," Sophie replied, her voice filled with a fierce pride. "Be careful, Liv. You're taking on a dragon." "I know," Olivia whispered, looking at the USB drive in her hand. "But I have a weapon he never forged." After ending the call, she composed an email from a new anonymous account. The recipient was Ben Carter's private encrypted address, which he listed on his professional page for sensitive tips. Subject: Evidence of violent domestic abuse by Harrison Croft. Body: Mr. Carter. You don't know me, but we met once years ago for a story. I am in possession of a video file recorded today, July 25th, 2025. The video shows my husband, Harrison Croft, in our New York apartment, committing an act of violent intimidation against me. I am 7 months pregnant. The video is clear and undeniable. I am prepared to provide it to you exclusively on the condition of anonymity until the story is published. This is not about money. This is about my safety and the safety of my child. If you are interested in exposing the truth behind the public facade of a celebrated public figure, I will be at the back corner booth of the Old Town Cafe on 3rd Avenue at 7 a.m. I will be wearing a grey trench coat and reading a copy of Meditations. Come alone. Attached is a 3-second soundless clip from the video. Just so you know, this is real. She attached a short, cropped gif of Harrison's fist making contact with the wall, a silent, damning piece of evidence. She took a deep breath, her finger hovering over the send button. This was the point of no return. The moment she pressed this, the life she knew, the gilded cage, the suffocating luxury, the silent terror would be over, A new life of uncertainty, public scrutiny, and battle would begin. She thought of her child, of the world she wanted to bring them into, a world where their mother wasn't afraid. She pressed send. The Old Town Cafe was a relic, a small, unassuming diner that had survived decades of gentrification by serving reliably decent coffee and greasy breakfasts. It was the last place anyone would expect to find the wife of a billionaire. At 6:50 a.m., Olivia slipped into the worn vinyl of the back booth. She had dressed down jeans, a simple black sweater, the grey trench coat and a baseball cap pulled low over her face. She placed the copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations on the table and ordered a black coffee she had no intention of drinking. Every nerve in her body was screaming. At precisely 7 a.m., a man entered the cafe. He was older than she remembered, perhaps in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a rumpled coat that suggested he valued function over fashion. It was Ben Carter. His eyes scanned the room instantly, dismissing the few other patrons, and landed on her. He approached the booth with a cautious, deliberate gait. "Mrs. Croft," he asked, his voice a low baritone. He didn't offer a hand, just slid into the opposite side of the booth. "I prefer Olivia Davenport," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. He gave a slight nod. "Fair enough. You brought a storm to my inbox this morning, Ms. Davenport. Is it a storm you're willing to chase?" "I watched the clip," he said, getting straight to the point. "It's compelling. But a 3-second GIF isn't a story. I need context. I need to see the full video. I need to verify its authenticity. And I need to know why you're doing this. The world will call you a gold digger, a scorned wife out for revenge. You need to be prepared for that." Olivia met his gaze unflinching. "I am prepared to be called worse. What I'm not prepared for is raising my child in a house where rage is normalized and violence is the answer to a disagreement. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this for my life." She reached into her bag and slid one of the encrypted USB drives across the table. "This is the full unedited file, time-stamped with metadata intact. My husband's IT security is legendary, but this system is completely independent. It's clean. The full video shows the entire argument, from the discussion about a caterer to the moment he punched the wall and walked away." Ben picked up the drive, examining it. "This could bring down one of the most powerful men in the country. It will have consequences for him, for his company, for you." "I'm counting on it," Olivia said. "My team will need a few hours to verify everything he said," pocketing the drive. "If it's what you say it is, we'll run it on the Chronicle's front page, digital first, by noon. Once it's public, my editors will want an exclusive interview. On the record. You'll have it," she agreed. "As soon as I'm in a secure location." Ben Carter stood up. "Stay safe, Ms. Davenport." He left as quietly as he had arrived. Olivia remained in the booth for another 10 minutes, her body thrumming with adrenaline. The first chess move had been made. Now she had to prepare for the counterattack. She left the cafe and took a winding, circuitous route through the city-switching subway lines twice before emerging in a completely different neighborhood. There, a black car was waiting. Sophie had come through. The driver simply held up a phone with the name Evelyn Reed on it. Olivia got in. The hours that followed were a blur of calculated action. Evelyn Reed was everything Sophie had promised, a powerhouse in a razor-sharp suit with an office in Midtown that radiated quiet, expensive competence. She listened to Olivia's story with fierce, focused attention, her expression unreadable. When Olivia finished, Evelyn gave a single, sharp nod. "Good," Evelyn said. The video is your shield and your sword. While Carter's team is verifying, we prepare for war. For the next 3 hours they worked. Evelyn and her team drafted divorce papers, citing irreconcilable differences and a history of controlling behavior and abuse. They prepared a motion for an emergency protective order to be filed the moment the story broke. They initiated proceedings to freeze a portion of the marital assets before Harrison could hide them offshore. Olivia signed document after document, her signature growing bolder with each one. She was no longer just Olivia. She was a plaintiff, a force of legal action. At 11:58 a.m., Olivia was in a hotel suite that Evelyn had secured under a corporate alias. Sophie was there, having landed at LaGuardia and come straight to the hotel. The sisters were sitting in silence watching the clock when Sophie's phone buzzed. Then Olivia's. Then they buzzed again and again, an electronic chorus of chaos. It had begun. A push alert from the New York Chronicle app was the first drop in the deluge exclusive tech. Billionaire Harrison Croft, seen in violent outburst against pregnant wife in leaked video. Sophie clicked the link. There it was. The front page of the Chronicle's website was dominated by a still frame from the video. Harrison, his face a mask of fury, his fist inches from a cowering Olivia. Below it, Ben Carter's meticulously detailed article laid out the story, embedding the full, shocking video. The storm had made landfall. Within minutes, Harrison Croft was the #1 trending topic worldwide. The video was everywhere, ripped from the Chronicle's site, and shared millions of times a minute across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. News channels broke into their regular programming. Business networks immediately began speculating on the impact on Croft Enterprises' stock. In his gleaming office tower, Harrison Croft was in a board meeting when his right-hand man, a perpetually nervous executive named Gregory, burst into the room, his face pale. He thrust an iPad in front of Harrison. Harrison saw the headline. He saw the picture. He saw the embedded video. He pressed play and watched himself, his private monster displayed for the entire world to see. For a moment he froze, the blood draining from his face. The other board members stared, their expressions a mixture of horror and cold calculation. The vanguard deal, his legacy, it was all evaporating in real time. His shock quickly morphed into a familiar volcanic rage. He hurled the iPad against the wall where it shattered. "Find her!" he bellowed at Gregory, his voice echoing in the stunned silence of the boardroom. "Find her now, and get me Robert Egan on the phone." Robert Egan was not just a lawyer. He was a crisis management artist, a fixer who made problems and people disappear. While Harrison scrambled to control the inferno, Olivia was giving her on-the-record interview to Ben Carter via a secure video link. With Evelyn Reed by her side, she told her story calmly and articulately. She spoke of the pattern of control, the emotional abuse, the isolation. She explained that she didn't leak the video for fame or money, but because she believed it was the only way to ensure he couldn't silence her. He built a public image of a perfect, benevolent man. She said, her voice clear and strong. "I wanted the world to see the man I lived with, the man who punched a wall next to his pregnant wife's head because he didn't like her choice of caterer. That one detail, the caterer, was a masterstroke. It was so petty, so absurd, that it made the violence all the more chilling and believable. It stripped Harrison of any possible justification, painting him not as a man who lost his temper under pressure, but as a pathetic tyrant. As the interview wrapped up, Evelyn's phone rang. It was the process server. He had just served a stunned Harrison Croft with divorce papers, and the temporary restraining order in the lobby of his own office building in front of a horde of reporters. The king was cornered in his castle. The walls, the real ones, and the metaphorical ones were closing in. And Olivia, the woman he had tried to reduce to a mere accessory, was holding the hammer. The 24 hours following the leak were a public relations bloodbath for Harrison Croft. His meticulously crafted image was not just tarnished, it was incinerated. Croft Enterprises' stock plummeted by 30% in pre-market trading, wiping out billions in value. The board of directors issued a terse statement announcing that Harrison was taking an indefinite leave of absence and that an internal investigation was underway. It was a corporate execution, swift and brutal. Harrison, however, was not a man who accepted defeat. Barricaded in his penthouse, the hole in the wall now a constant mocking reminder of his hubris, he assembled his war council. At the head of the table was Robert Egan, the crisis manager, a man with a reptilian smile and no discernible conscience. Alongside him sat a team of cutthroat litigators from the city's most feared law firm. "The narrative is out of control," Egan stated, pacing in front of the window. "Right now, she's Joan of Arc, and you're King Herod. We need to flip that. We need to make her the villain. She has a video of me punching a wall next to her pregnant head." Harrison snarled, pouring himself another scotch. "How do you flip that?" "We don't attack the video. The video is a fact. We attack the person who leaked it," Egan explained, his eyes glinting. "We paint Olivia Davenport as a manipulative, unstable gold digger. She knew you were under pressure. She provoked you. She had a hidden camera ready to capture the one moment you snapped. It was a setup, a multi-million-dollar shakedown. The strategy was classic character assassination. Within hours, the counteroffensive began. Anonymous sources close to Harrison Croft began whispering to tabloid journalists and gossip bloggers. Stories began to surface, crafted from half-truths and outright lies. Olivia Davenport had a history of emotional instability. She was unhappy that Croft insisted on a bulletproof prenuptial agreement. Friends say she was obsessed with money and status. Was the pregnancy a trap to secure the Croft fortune? They dug into her past, unearthing a college boyfriend who, when paid a handsome sum, was willing to describe her as dramatic and demanding. They leaked details of her prenuptial agreement, framing her legal challenge as a greedy money grab rather than a fight for a fair settlement. Olivia, watching the smear campaign unfold from the sterile safety of her hotel suite, felt a surge of nausea that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. She had expected it, Evelyn had warned her, but the sheer viciousness of it was breathtaking. "Don't read it," Sophie advised, trying to take the tablet from her hands. "It's poison." "No," Olivia said, her jaw tight. "I need to see what they're doing. I need to know the weapons they're using." In their own war room, Evelyn Reed was calm, almost serene. "This is predictable," she told Olivia over a conference call. "It's the standard playbook for powerful abusers. They are also making a critical mistake. They are underestimating you." Evelyn's strategy was not to engage in the mudslinging. "We stay above it. We let the video speak for itself, and we focus on the legal arena. The court of public opinion is fickle. A court of law requires evidence." The first legal skirmish was the hearing for the permanent protective order. Harrison's lawyers argued that the incident was a one-time mistake, an aberration born of immense stress. They portrayed him as a man deeply remorseful for his actions, a man who loved his wife and was desperate to save his family. They submitted sworn affidavits from staff and friends attesting to his gentle nature. Then it was Evelyn's turn. She didn't call Olivia to the stand to be cross-examined and torn apart. Instead, she presented her own evidence. She started by playing the video again, forcing Harrison, who was present via video link, to watch it in front of the judge. But she didn't stop there. This was where Olivia's meticulous, fearful documentation paid off. Evelyn presented a timeline of evidence stretching back over a year. "Your Honor," Evelyn began, her voice crisp and clear. "The defense claims this was a one-time mistake. We have evidence to the contrary." She submitted time-stamped photographs of the laptop Harrison had accidentally broken. An audio recording captured on Olivia's phone of Harrison verbally berating her, calling her worthless and an embarrassment. Emails from Harrison to Olivia's friends, subtly discouraging them from visiting. Financial statements showing how Harrison had systematically closed Olivia's personal credit cards, rerouting all her finances through a joint account that he monitored daily. It was a devastating mosaic of coercive control. The punch was not an isolated act. It was the crescendo of a long campaign of psychological abuse. But the real twist the move Harrison and his team never saw coming came from an unexpected quarter. Gregory Harrison's loyal right-hand man had been observing the fallout with growing horror. He had enabled Harrison for years, cleaning up his messes, soothing his ego, and turning a blind eye to his temper. But seeing the video, the cold terror in Olivia's eyes, and then witnessing the brutal campaign to destroy her, it had cracked his conscience. He had a daughter of his own. Panicked by the internal investigation at Croft Enterprises, and terrified of being legally implicated in Harrison's downfall, Gregory made a choice. He contacted Evelyn Reed. He didn't have evidence of more physical abuse. He had something far more damaging to a man like Harrison Croft, evidence of financial crimes. Gregory provided Evelyn with documents proving Harrison had been using the Croft Foundation, the very foundation they were planning the gala for, as a personal slush fund, funneling charitable donations to cover personal expenses and risky private investments. He was laundering money through his own philanthropy. At the next hearing, which was meant to be a preliminary discussion about asset division, Evelyn Reed dropped the bomb. "Your Honor, my client is not just a victim of domestic abuse, but she has also unwittingly been made party to potential federal crimes," Evelyn announced to a stunned courtroom. "We have evidence of significant financial impropriety related to the Croft Foundation, and we will be turning this evidence over to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York." The color drained from the faces of Harrison's lawyers. This changed everything. This was no longer a messy divorce. It was a case of charity fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. Harrison's personal liberty was now on the line. The legal battlefield had just expanded, and Harrison was now fighting a war on two fronts, with his reputation in tatters and the federal government about to become his new adversary. The smear campaign against Olivia halted abruptly. Robert Egan and his team were now in damage control mode for a much bigger crisis. Harrison Croft, the untouchable titan, was no longer just fighting to save his fortune. He was fighting to stay out of prison. The news of the impending federal investigation was the final fatal blow to Harrison Croft's empire. The board of Croft Enterprises, which had initially placed him on leave, now moved to terminate him entirely, invoking a morality clause in his contract. The man who had built the company from nothing was unceremoniously exiled, his name scrubbed from the corporate letterhead like an embarrassing typo. His one-time allies and sycophants in the worlds of business and society vanished, their loyalty as hollow as his public persona. The invitations stopped. The calls went unreturned. The silence was absolute. For Olivia, the shift was seismic. The narrative which had briefly been twisted against her snapped back with a vengeance. She was no longer just a victim of domestic violence, but a whistleblower who had exposed a corrupt charlatan. The public, which had been fed a diet of lies about her being a gold digger, now saw her as a woman of immense courage. Donations poured into women's shelters in her name. Advocacy groups lauded her bravery. She had weathered the storm. She spent those weeks in a quiet, secluded estate in upstate New York, rented by Evelyn's firm. Sophie stayed with her, a constant, grounding presence. For the first time in years, Olivia felt the suffocating weight of Harrison's control lift. She took long walks in the woods, breathing in the scent of pine and damp earth. She read books not to appear smart, but for the simple joy of it. She ate what she wanted, wore what she wanted, and spoke when she wanted. She was slowly, carefully rebuilding herself. Her pregnancy progressed peacefully. Away from the stress and fear of the penthouse, she felt a profound connection to the child growing inside her. This baby was no longer just a reason to escape. It was her partner in this new life, a future she was fighting for. Meanwhile, Harrison's world was shrinking to the size of a courtroom. His high-powered legal team, now focused on the federal charges, advised him to settle the divorce quickly and quietly. A public, drawn-out fight with Olivia would only provide more ammunition for the prosecutors and further poison any potential jury pool. The settlement negotiation was not a negotiation at all. It was a surrender. Evelyn Reed, armed with the threat of Gregory's testimony and the weight of the federal case, dictated the terms. Olivia would receive a settlement that was far more than the prenup stipulated, not out of greed, but as a matter of principle and security. It included the full transfer of a trust fund for their child, ensuring the baby would never have to depend on Harrison for anything. More importantly, it included Harrison relinquishing all parental rights. He could never see contact or make any claim to their child. It was the ultimate price for his actions. He would lose his legacy, not just in business, but in blood. Faced with the prospect of a lengthy prison sentence, a desperate Harrison agreed to everything. He signed the papers, his signature, a weak scrawl, a ghost of his former arrogant flourish. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place a week later. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York held a press conference. Standing before a bank of cameras, he formally announced the indictment of Harrison Croft on multiple counts of wire fraud and money laundering. He specifically credited information provided by concerned citizens for initiating the investigation. Harrison Croft, the man who once graced the cover of Forbes, was now pictured on the front of the New York Post, in a grainy photograph, his face ashen as he walked into a federal courthouse. The visionary had become a common criminal. The story was no longer about a billionaire's marital problems. It was about the complete and utter collapse of a fraudulent empire. A few days after the settlement was finalized, Olivia was sitting on the porch of the upstate house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Sophie brought her a cup of decaf tea. "It's over," Sophie said softly. "You did it, Liv. You actually did it." Olivia placed a hand on her belly, where she felt a gentle kick. A small smile touched her lips. "We did it." She thought about the woman she was just a few months ago, trembling on that sofa, feeling small and silenced. It felt like a lifetime ago. She had learned the hardest lesson of her life in that gilded cage, that true power wasn't about money or fame or control over others. It was about controlling your own story. The leak of the video had been an act of desperation, but it had transformed into an act of liberation. It hadn't just exposed Harrison, it had freed her. She had walked through fire and emerged not unscathed, but stronger, purer, and finally, unequivocally, herself. She wasn't Mrs. Harrison Croft anymore. She was Olivia Davenport, a mother-to-be, a survivor, and the architect of her own quiet, beautiful freedom. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a very long time, it was hers to write. 6 months felt like a lifetime. The world that had imploded in a storm of headlines and legal filings had settled into a fragile, quiet peace. Winter had descended upon New England, blanketing the landscape in a soft, sound-dampening layer of snow. Olivia had traded the suffocating luxury of a Park Avenue penthouse for a modest, charming colonial in a quiet suburb of Boston. It was a 5-minute drive from her sister Sophie, a proximity that felt like a fortress wall. Her new life was measured in the rhythms of her daughter Lily. The baby had been born in late autumn, a healthy, beautiful girl with Olivia's dark hair, and to her immense relief, none of Harrison's features. Her world, once filled with galas and hostile takeovers, now revolved around 3 a.m. feedings, the scent of baby powder, and the gummy, unconditional smile of her child. The silence she had once craved was now filled with lullabies and the gentle gurgle of a happy baby. She was healing. Most days she believed it. But trauma leaves echoes. A car door slamming in the street could send a jolt of adrenaline through her. A raised voice in a movie made her flinch. She had nightmares where she was back in the penthouse, the walls closing in a gaping black hole next to her head. Harrison was a ghost who haunted the edges of her newfound peace. He was under house arrest in his empty penthouse, awaiting a federal trial. His communications monitored, his assets frozen. He was a cutted beast. Yet she knew beasts were most dangerous when cornered. The package arrived on a Tuesday. It was a plain brown box with no return address, the label printed in a generic font. Sophie, who was over for lunch, eyed it with suspicion. "Probably another baby gift from some well-wisher," Olivia said, trying to sound casual as she sliced through the tape with a kitchen knife. The public by and large remained on her side. She'd become a reluctant symbol of survival, and gifts from strangers weren't uncommon. But this wasn't a baby blanket or a stuffed animal. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a worn, leather-bound book. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She knew it instantly. It was her father's journal. Her father, a history professor who had died a decade ago, had been a prolific writer. His journals were his most prized possessions. After his death during a chaotic move, several of them had been lost, including this one from his final year. Olivia had mourned its loss for years. She had told Harrison the story once in the early days, in a moment of intimate, trusting vulnerability. He had listened, his expression full of sympathy. She opened the cover. On the inside page, in her father's familiar scrawl, was his name, Professor Alistair Davenport. Tucked beneath it was a small, crisp, new piece of paper. On it, a single typewritten sentence. "A legacy is a hard thing to lose, isn't it?" The air rushed out of Olivia's lungs. The journal felt suddenly cold, toxic. This wasn't a gift. It was a threat. It was Harrison reaching through the walls of his prison to touch her, to violate the sanctuary of her new life. He was reminding her that he knew her, that he owned pieces of her past, that he could still unearth her most private sorrows and use them as weapons. He was telling her that even though she had taken his future, he still had a hold on her past. Live. What is it? "You're as white as a sheet," Sophie said, rushing to her side. Olivia couldn't speak. She just pointed at the journal at the taunting, anonymous note. Sophie read it, and her face hardened. "That monster," she whispered, her voice laced with venom. "How he's under house arrest." That was the question that screamed in Olivia's mind. She immediately called Evelyn Reed. The lawyer was furious, her voice a whip crack over the phone. "This is a flagrant violation of the restraining order's spirit, if not its letter," Evelyn said. "It's witness intimidation. It's psychological warfare. I'll get a PI on this immediately. Don't worry, Olivia. We'll find out how he did it." The private investigator, a former NYPD detective named Mike Corrigan, was discreet and efficient. For 2 weeks, Olivia lived on edge, jumping at every shadow. She installed a more advanced security system. She rarely left the house. The ghost had become a palpable presence again, the echoes of her past threatening to drown out the quiet joys of her present. Corrigan's report came via a secure email to Evelyn, who relayed the findings to Olivia and Sophie in a conference call. "Harrison has been using his legal counsel visits." Evelyn explained, her tone grim. "He's allowed privileged, unmonitored conversations with his defense team. He's been passing coded messages to a junior paralegal on his team, a kid named Leo Batch. Batch then uses burner phones and cash drops to communicate with a network of fixers Harrison still has on his payroll." "So he's still pulling the strings," Olivia said, her stomach twisting. "It's worse than that," Evelyn continued. "The journal was just a message to you, a way to terrorize you. The PI discovered the primary focus of this network. Harrison isn't just trying to spook you, Olivia. He's actively trying to blow up the entire federal case against him." A cold dread settled over Olivia. How Gregory Evelyn said, and Olivia's heart sank. The whistleblower. Gregory is the prosecution's star witness. His testimony about the Croft Foundation fraud is the linchpin of their case. Harrison's people have been systematically dismantling Gregory's life. They got him fired from his new job by anonymously sending his employer falsified documents about his involvement in the scandal. They've had him followed. Last week, his teenage daughter received a text message with a picture of herself walking home from school. There was no threat, just the picture. Just like your journal. It was a message. Sophie swore under her breath. "The U.S. Attorney's Office is trying to protect him," Evelyn said. "But Gregory is falling apart. He's terrified. Harrison's goal is to intimidate him into recanting his testimony or refusing to cooperate. If Gregory folds, the government's case becomes much weaker." Harrison's lawyers could argue that the evidence was provided by an unreliable witness under duress. It's Harrison's Hail Mary pass to walk free. The room fell silent. Olivia looked from her sister's worried face to the baby monitor where Lily was sleeping peacefully in her crib. She had thought this was over. She believed that by taking Harrison's money and his reputation, she had won. But she was wrong. His freedom was the one thing she hadn't taken, and now he was using it as a weapon to claw his way back. If he succeeded, if he walked out of that courthouse a free man, he would never stop. The packages would never stop. The fear would never stop. He would be a shadow stretching over her and her daughter's entire lives. Her peace, she realized, was entirely conditional. It depended on him being locked away truly and finally powerless. A new kind of resolve, cold and hard as steel, settled in her heart. She had spent months healing, building a quiet life. Now she understood. Hiding wasn't healing. true healing was making sure the monster could never hurt anyone again. "Evelyn," Olivia said, her voice devoid of any tremor. It was the voice of a CEO, not a victim. "When I was married to Harrison, I wasn't just a decorative accessory. I sat in on meetings. I was there for phone calls about the foundation. He used to boast to me late at night about how he'd move money through the charity accounts to fund his passion projects. He called it creative accounting. He thought I was too stupid to understand." She paused, taking a deep breath. "He thought I wasn't listening. But I was. I remember dates. I remember project names. I remember numbers." Evelyn was silent for a moment on the other end of the line. Olivia could almost hear the gears turning in her sharp legal mind. "Olivia," she said slowly, "are you saying you can corroborate Gregory's testimony? That you can be a direct witness to the fraud I'm saying?" "I can be a better witness than Gregory," Olivia corrected her. Gregory saw the spreadsheets. "I heard the confession from the man himself, the U.S. Attorney's Office. Would they be interested in a new star witness? They would see it as a gift from God," Evelyn breathed. "But Olivia, this means taking the stand. In open court, his lawyers will try to tear you apart. They will use every lie, every piece of the old smear campaign. They will paint you as a vengeful ex-wife. It will be brutal." Olivia looked over at Lily again, sleeping soundly, blissfully unaware of the darkness her mother was fighting. She had taken the video to protect this child. Now she had to finish the job. She couldn't build a life of peace on a foundation of fear. She had to build it on a foundation of justice. "Let them try," Olivia said, her voice ringing with the clarity of absolute certainty. "They called me a gold digger. They called me unstable. They can call me whatever they want. But when I take that stand and look that jury in the eye, the only thing they're going to call me is credible. Get me the U.S. attorney. In the end, this isn't just a story about a leaked video and the fall of a powerful man. It's a testament to the quiet strength that can be forged in the darkest of places." Olivia Davenport's journey from a terrified wife in a golden prison to a woman who reclaimed her own life serves as a powerful reminder that the truth, when wielded with courage, is the most formidable weapon of all. She didn't just escape her abuser. She dismantled the very source of his power, proving that real strength isn't about how hard you can punch, but about how resiliently you can stand back up. Her story is a voice for the voiceless, and a symbol of hope for anyone who feels trapped. If Olivia's story of courage resonated with you and you believe in the power of truth, please give this video a like and share it to spread the message. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that matter. What would you have done in her position? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.